Welcome to today's webinar, Drive the Future with DriveWorks. I'm your host, Andrew White, Account Manager in TPM's Manufacturing Division. Presenting today is Joel Hanneman, DriveWorks developer and a technical solutions consultant here at TPM. Also joining us will be Matt Salentine, Sales Director for the Manufacturing Division. Before we get started, I want to make sure to point out that Joel will be answering your questions at the conclusion of this presentation. If you have something that you would like to address, please post it. Please post your questions on the side panel of the webinar screen. And now that I've introduced you to our team, we're all set on how to answer questions. I wanted to quickly introduce you to TPM. We've been around for over 48 years. We've got 6 locations strategically located in the Southeast, over 25 service and support professionals, and manage over 20,000 software licenses for more than 3,000 customers. We pride ourselves on having big company resources with a small company feel. These are some of the brands we represent. As you can see, we are very, very diversified in our reach in order to better serve our customers. We're broken up strategically into 4 service areas: software, hardware, printing and graphics, and support and services. So now that I've introduced you to TPM and gone over some housekeeping items, I'm going to turn today's webinar over to Joel Hanneman to get you started on today's presentation. Joel?
All right, thank you, Andrew, and thanks everyone for joining us today. Looking forward to showcasing DriveWorks and giving everyone a little preview on what it can do and what value it can add to your organization. So the plan today is to start off with a brief PowerPoint introduction to the DriveWorks platform. We'll follow that up with a live online configurator demo, and that will be followed by a local CAD automation demo on my own machine, where we will have the opportunity to get into the nuts and bolts of how DriveWorks works. And hopefully that'll leave plenty of time for Q&A, and then our TPM team can describe to you, how we can follow up and continue the discussion about DriveWorks in your company. Okay, so what is DriveWorks? That can be a challenging question to answer, because there's quite a bit to it. But what I want to do today is just distill it down into 3 kind of pillars, three legs of the stool, so to speak, and we can more or less drive everything into those categories. So the first is all things design automation, and that is exclusively working with SolidWorks CAD. The second leg of the stool is product configurator, or CPQ, which stands for configure price quote. This is continues to be an emerging space in the CAD world, and extending your design into sales, and we'll talk about that in more detail. And the third leg of the stool is, well, everything else. There are many aspects to your business, many moving parts, and inevitably most of them are not connected, at least not in any meaningful way. So how do we go about taking your design data, your configuration data, your customer data, your order data, et cetera, maybe some machining, materials requirements, all that. And these are all interrelated parts of your business, and how do we bring all that together into one cohesive system that makes sense? Okay, so that's everything else. So let's dig into design automation for a bit. There's a sort of a generic approach to working through design automation that I'll describe to you in a few slides here. So first of all, you have to figure to institutionalize your design intent. This is stuff that I think most companies would say is just sort of ingrained into, well, any number of places, whether it be into your employees, your staff's memories and recollections and minds. It might be captured in a variety of documents. It could be living in formulas in an Excel spreadsheet. It could be BOM information coming out of an ERP. So it could be documented somewhere or not. Maybe it's just out in the ether, and folks in the company just know how to design the product because they've been there forever, and that's just the end of the story. So you can't automate until you begin the process of capturing all of that information and putting it in one place to begin working with it. Okay. After that, you have to organize it and distill it down into some sort of actionable, some sort of logical form. Okay. In doing so, you will create and then be able to act on what will become the single source of truth for all things design. Okay. So once all this information, data, and know-how is collected somewhere in some big virtual bucket or real bucket of paperwork, the next thing you have to do is start to create a design process that is guided, that is informed. Typically, at least within DriveWorks, that would entail creating some sort of graphic user interface or form, and that will lead to creating a total user experience. Okay, and so this little graphic on the right is just an example form that was created from scratch in DriveWorks. And so every button and feature and doodad and note and image and table, all that stuff was put there specifically to create a very tailored design experience for the ultimate user of the design automation. Okay, so once the user experience is sort of envisioned and developed, you can then start to create what we would call workflows and processes. So, okay, what exactly happens when they click this button? Or, well, depending on who's logged in, who's allowed to access certain pieces of information or carry out certain tasks. When you design widget A versus widget B, do you need to follow a slightly different design process? All the real controls that might exist in your company, again, sort of in the ether, need to actually be captured into the DriveWorks platform. Okay, once those two major steps are done, then you can actually start the process of automating. Okay, and this is where you're going to execute that design intent and create any type of output that you desire, not at the speed of someone operating a mouse, but at the speed of your machine, your hardware, your server. Okay, so DriveWorks will take all the design intent, which can be captured in the form of tables, formulas, variables, all manner of SolidWorks files, external data, etc., process all of it in a very particular fashion, and then create your outputs. Those outputs could be SolidWorks models files, part files, drawing files, PDFs of drawings, images of models, Excel, Word, e-drawings, you name it, not to mention any kind of actual data export. That's what I would consider the totality of the generated output from any given project. So with all that automated, there's some obvious sort of benefits to this, and one is reducing errors along the way. You know, if you can reduce various touch points where folks from different teams or within a team or any individual has to go from one system to another or enter values, do repetitive tasks, etc. If you can start to remove those things, then you obviously reduce the chance for error. With the reduction in errors, but also by driving all this automation through your hardware, of course, you increase productivity. We have use cases where some companies would have traditionally taken a week to produce a full set of manufacturing drawings for a big job, and all that work can be reduced down to, let's say, minutes. So huge gains in productivity can be had. In doing all this, another way of looking at this is you can start to shift your valuable human resources from doing these repetitive tasks to actually doing something that presents more value either to the customer or internally within the company. Once this automation agenda starts to take hold and form in a company that's adopted DriveWorks has a newfound gain in what automation is all about. Inevitably, the thought process becomes, what else can I start to automate? And luckily with DriveWorks, the list goes on and on and on. It's not just restricted to all things SolidWorks, but you can start to branch out from your design your design office and start to automate tasks that relate to adjacent departments, adjacent parts of the overall workflow, et cetera. So we'll see more about that as we progress. Okay, moving on to what does configurator mean? So in principle, it's extending your design capabilities that you would have in-house and extending that to the public domain. Now, public can mean, it might be your internal sales team, it could be an external sales team, it could be your distribution network, or it could be out in the public. This is all possible because the configurator environment is web-based, so it can be wherever it needs to be accessed from and by whom. So to the extent that you set up your user experience, your total user experience for design automation purposes, you can do the same to create a curated, guided process to carry out the act of selling and control the sales process all along. We'll get in more into processes and workflows and such, but those are all completely customizable and can be created just to your company's needs. Furthermore, DriveWorks features an out-of-the-box, you could think of as a template for configure price quotes, and this is a method to actually start to manage your quoting log, your sales order log. It might, you could think of it as starting to overlap a bit with your ERP system or however you manage orders internally, but to the extent that you accept quotes or enter orders within DriveWorks, there is an out-of-the-box template for managing those documents and those processes, again, online, accessible by whomever, whenever, and under certain circumstances. So it really creates the backbone right out of the box for managing your workflows in that web environment. Okay, finally, what is that everything else bit that I mentioned? I like to think of everything else as an interstitial space that is between each individual role and employee at your company, each business system or manufacturing software or piece of equipment, etc., that you have. And the age-old problem through technology is how do you actually bring all that together into one cohesive system, one comprehensive, holistic environment, such that everything actually starts to play nice together. You know, with companies that I've been involved with, it's not uncommon to have, you start the order in QuickBooks, and then you have to export to Excel, and then you copy that Excel to another sheet, and then you print that out, a PDF, and hand it to the designer, and then the designer enters it in CAD, and then he hands it to the CAM person, etc. And so if you were to follow your whole workflow for a full cycle order process, you might go through various systems. Some are automated, some are manual, some are error prone, etc. And each one of those connection points is that interstitial space that really isn't all that well connected. So DriveWorks has a big role to play in connecting all these systems. Controls the who, the what, the when, and if your company is interested in digital transformation, it is the glue that can bring all these systems together. This slide is intentionally busy. Threw a lot of stuff on here just to showcase the fact that DriveWorks can and does interact with various systems through various means. Some are out of the box. Some can be quite technical, using APIs and web services and such, or it can just be working through a SQL database, or as something as simple as just working through an Excel spreadsheet or text files. But most of the time, once a company has embraced DriveWorks, for one reason, they start to see the benefits of how they can use it to create that connection point for everything else to come together. All of this is underpinned by the fact that DriveWorks out of the box is a completely customizable platform. So custom means custom. It doesn't mean, okay, there's a template and you can start to customize the template a little bit here and there. Custom means custom. So this little graphic on the right shows what the form environment looks like when you open up DriveWorks for the first time. There's nothing there because you have to create it. And the point is that you can create it exactly how you need it, the experience that you want, the details that you want to capture, the process that you want to enact. That is all open for your engagement. Okay, so that includes establishing workflows. How do you want a quote to be processed? What is the exact order of operations that you have when you release an order from sales into the factory, etc.? That's a workflow. And workflows are created from scratch, and each step along the way and each connection point is completely customizable. And same with establishing any given process. Okay, we have a simple process on the top. It's just 2 basic steps. A slightly more sophisticated example of a process in the middle, where 1 step leads to possibly 2 other steps. And then maybe a more typical example of a tiered process that's based on pass or fail conditions, leading to various either outputs or documents being created, who's able to log in. I mean, a process can touch any aspect of the deployment. And so that's why the DriveWorks platform is completely customizable. All of this happens in nearly a no-code environment, but I'd maybe say it's low-code. This is a typical rule builder interface. Okay, so the user need only have moderate experience in Excel, let's say, entering formulas. If you've mastered the if statement, then you're pretty much qualified to write rules in DriveWorks. Okay, so it's the syntax is intuitive, the logic is fairly straightforward, and that underlying capability is on top of this whole custom aspect, which is really quite powerful. Okay, so that's a quick intro into DriveWorks. So let's step into some actual real working demos here. Okay, so first thing I want to do is just bring your attention to the DriveWorks site, their demo site, which is driveworkslive.com. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is just review all that is on this web page, and then we'll go into a real demo. So the first thing I want to point out is everything that you're seeing in my browser is actually DriveWorks. Okay, the look, the feel, the text, the position of buttons, all that stuff, that has been implemented with DriveWorks. Okay, so right here we have an example of a configurator that's actually embedded within the website. So you can configure the product kind of live just right there within that window. We have a variety of industry examples of other configurator demos, some of which we'll go through, that bring you to a slightly different environment to experience the demo or the web-enabled configuration. Below that is some very interesting videos on the CPQ template. So if you're interested in how you can start to manage your quoting and sales order process in a template fashion, there's a lot of good information here, as well as a working demo. And finally, for those that need to have their curiosity satisfied more than what we're going to go over today, there are demos on all the various technologies that enable DriveWorks to do what it does. So you can dive into how the rules work, you can dive into custom workflows, you can dive into what a 3D configurator is, or if you're interested in integrations, there's a lot of nice content here. So I invite you to spend some time on this site when you have a chance. It is very helpful and does a great job of explaining how DriveWorks works. Okay, so let's hop into a few demos. I want to run through a few very quickly just to showcase some various types. So here we're going to do a bifold door example. And I should point out that this website is working off of a server in the UK. So this is being hosted on their own machinery, and all the processing that is happening is being delivered from there. Of course, if you were to set up this type of environment for your company, the hosting would be done more locally, which of course would add some performance benefits. So what's happening now is the entire project and all the graphics, the 3D technology that is specific to DriveWorks is being loaded into my browser. It might be 3 or 4 megabytes worth of content, but once that's loaded, this is just an example of a live 3D environment with a nice bit of scenery set up. You know, that in this case they decided is a nice way to sort of project the product in case here. So we can change some dimensions and watch that the product is actually changing real time in front of you. And they've chosen to use a slider to control these basic dimensions, but you could enter it, let's say, manually by hand if you have something specific. In any case, you're getting a live 3D representation of that product real time right in front of you. Okay, so they're just going to capture some basic dimensions in this demo. Move on to the next slide, which they're going to ask you about finish. Okay, that's more of a wood grain. Let's choose maybe the maple. That looks kind of nice. Okay, so we've affected the finish. And let's add some vertical mold bars. Okay. I don't know what your tastes are, but I think that's decent looking. Okay, and we've got some hardware choices to make. I'm going to add some black anodized. Okay, so this, again, this is just an example. We're affecting some very basic attributes of the product. And finally, you know, they're treating me as, let's say, a retail customer. So I'm just going to add some, they pre-populated some personal information. And okay, I'm done speccing the product, so time to place the order. And they want you to enter okay. So just like that, my imaginary order or request for a quote has been submitted. And right this moment on that UK server, DriveWorks, another module of DriveWorks has picked up the order and is going to start processing all that they want to process at this point. So it'll be quotes, a variety of other documents, maybe some PDFs of CAD drawings, etc. But within a few minutes, that'll show up in my inbox, so we can take a look at what that looks like. Okay, so that was a pretty simple product, you know, a discrete product like a door. But let's take a look at something more complicated. This is an HVAC system in one of these big industrial jobs that goes on the top of the building. Okay, and so this is their take on distilling a very complicated set of equipment and creating a guided user interface. So we're going to, I don't know much about HVACs, but I'll just make some basic choices. So it would seem that the connection options and the airflow are pretty critical, like initial questions. So they want to get those out of the way because that probably impacts, you know, the overall design in some important way. Maybe impacts other decision making. Okay, so they're going to lead me through adding each module. Okay, so I added an entry module. Probably needs a fan. Change some specs on the fan. Add a window. Okay, that's nice. Filter, got to clear out all that smoke that's in the air these days. Okay, that's good. Add a little heat. A lot of heat. Okay, and you can see this product, the structure of this product is being built here. They've chosen to add that into the configurator. You could have the BOM be shown and the associated pricing. Let's see, and let's wrap it up with an exit module. There we go. I'm going to confirm that this specification is done. They have given the option of checking out the BOM, which is right here, or you can check out your quote that's been already generated real time. Okay, ready to go. And again, within a few minutes, actually it won't be a few minutes, this is a very complicated system. I think the actual CAD generation, the number of files that it will touch is well into the hundreds. So this isn't getting generated within a couple minutes. It might be half an hour before all the actual content is done, but they will send that stuff into the inbox as they see fit. Oop. Right. So just like that, again on their server, the automation portion of DriveWorks is already creating some of these documents. They've chosen to loop that back into my login here. So we can actually see real time what that server is doing and all the documents that it's created. So it's cranking away right now as we speak. Okay, so speaking of which, why don't we actually take a look at that happening on my own machine, so we can see that this isn't just a bunch of smoke and mirrors. Okay, so I've got DriveWorks Administrator. This is sort of the back-end development module of DriveWorks. Okay, just a very quick run through of, well, let me show you the project that we're going to run, and then we'll kind of back into some of the details. So this is another demo that is set up to design emergency showers like a factory setting. Okay, so to create that form environment is a matter of setting up various forms, and you have graphics and buttons. And so, you know, my point of showing you this is that every aspect of this form has been set up completely in a custom fashion. You're not working within some pre-established set of limitations within a form building environment. So using the form designer in DriveWorks is a lot like PowerPoint. If you were to start off with a completely blank PowerPoint slide and then make it exactly how you want it to look and feel, that's pretty similar to what you're going to do in DriveWorks. Okay, so there's a lot of dragging and dropping. Each field has a slew of properties that can be controlled to create just the right behavior and also just provide that total user experience that you want. Okay, so back to the demo. So we've got a emergency shower stall, and the way they set it up is that they just want you to pick certain things or not. It's kind of a pretty basic implementation. We're just adding or subtracting kind of pre-established features. Okay, so let's get rid of the little privacy thing there and call that a system. Okay, and we note here that we've got pricing going on real time, just for fun. And let's go ahead and set this off. So before I hit submit, I just want to show you what's going to start happening here. Okay, so we have SolidWorks, which is obviously going to do all the CAD work, and we have what's called DriveWorks Autopilot. This is the DriveWorks module that does the actual management of the automation. Okay, so once I set this order free, we'll see Autopilot pick it up, and then it'll start telling SolidWorks what to do. Okay, so we're going to submit the order, and in the back end we get that kind of view. Okay, but DriveWorks just picked up the fact that there's an order to process. It's going to take a minute. It's going to run through the custom workflow. That workflow calls for generating models, so we're going to start doing that. And it's going to open up every model that is required, change its dimensions, change its features, delete stuff, add stuff, whatever the design intent calls for. And it's going to execute that basically as fast as a SolidWorks file can be opened, have all of the changes to the model swept through in one swoop, rebuild, and then save the model. I chose this project, the shower demo, because it is a fairly small assembly, and for demonstration purposes, we'll get through this within a couple minutes, including drawings, PDFs, and other types of documents. That HVAC example that I showed you, the equivalent automation, it could take, half an hour, but it's creating hundreds and hundreds of documents, and it's just not good content for this kind of a presentation. Almost done. We're at the assembly now. While we're waiting, I can show you the email that's already come to my inbox here 4 minutes ago. Okay, so again, everything that you see in this email has been custom formatted. If you don't like the way it looks, yours can be set up however you want. They've chosen to have some graphics, some custom text reflective of the product, an actual image of the product that I expect, etc., and then a variety of documents. Let's see what those are. Okay, a drawing showing color isometric view, PDF of the drawing with a basic BOM, another set of views that they thought is handy to show for this type of product. This might be more like a manufacturing print. I don't know if you would send this to the customer or not. Yeah. And so the point is that there's a variety of documents that were specifically created for me based on the design that I put in online just a few weeks ago. Okay, so it looks like the automation is done. So let's see what it produced. Okay, so here it is, 11:30 a.m. just created. Okay, and so this has been deposited onto my local machine, but of course these files could end up anywhere on a network or even in the cloud. So the folder structure and the naming convention of all these folders is completely customizable. As is the actual naming convention of the documents themselves. Okay, so let's take a look at the assembly. There it is in all its glory. Fully defined SOLIDWORKS assembly created just for us right then and there. Okay, so let's see what might have been driven here. So any sort of dimension has been captured and driven. Features have been suppressed or unsuppressed. Components within the assembly or even sub-assemblies within the assembly have been deleted or unsuppressed or replaced. I mean, all sorts of things have happened to this assembly from the starting point in the automation. Okay. What else? We also have some drawings that they've chosen to put in a separate folder. So here's the drawing folder. In this case, they might have one drawing for customer facing purposes and another set of drawings for manufacturing purposes. Okay, so just a basic drawing for now, but this could be as complicated as you want. Pretty much every attribute of a drawing can be controlled and automated with DriveWorks. Okay, during that time, during the automation, it also created a PDF of the drawing. Nothing crazy there, but it's there. It created some e-drawings, so maybe your customers will need to use e-drawings to view the solid model. And it also created a PDF of the order summary, which is probably set up for email. Okay, all that within a few minutes, without really any human hands touching the process all along. We talked about custom workflows. This project has a very, very basic workflow. You start with a design step. You click the submit button. It goes into a processing step, which is the DriveWorks autopilot automation module, and then it's complete. It's a very linear workflow. Once it's complete, it's complete. There's nothing else to it. But this workflow could be much more complicated, and they often are. You might want to have a way to loop back. You might need to have some approval steps. You might need your engineering manager to sign off, and then your production manager to sign off. None of that is built into this this particular demo, but that all can be. And this is the workspace in which all of that happens. So they've set up the initial phase called design, and there's all sorts of operations that can be attached to either entering or leaving that part of the workflow. How you transition in and out of it is all highly customizable and tunable. And there's probably some macros here. Let's find a more sophisticated one. Okay, so they're releasing a series of two documents and then sending an email in just that exact order. Setting up another document and then sending a separate email, etc. So again, all of this is fairly WYSIWYG, drag and drop type development work. So you're not seeing, there's no console here to type code per se. The most technical it gets for this demo is creating the rules for the actual SOLIDWORKS output. So an example of that top level assembly file, the naming, the rule for establishing the file name is, okay, they just want this plus this variable here, which creates a unique number for that job. Okay, so if you can write, if you can type a formula into Excel, you pretty much got it covered for creating your rules and underlying logic in DriveWorks. There's probably some tables here capturing some of the design intent and some underlying product data. Okay, and that's about it. For the intents and purposes of this demo, that pretty much covers the full cycle approach here to what DriveWorks can do. So I think with that, we can, well, I'll just point out again that what we're seeing here is, again, 3 components. It's design automation, it's extending the design automation into that configurator type environment, and then everything else that's needed to very precisely control how all this works together. Now, not every company needs all this. In fact, some companies only use a little bit of some of these elements. There are use cases where companies are using DriveWorks and that have nothing to do with SOLIDWORKS and nothing to do with an online configurator. They just take advantage of the integration capabilities and choose to run their business off of it somehow. In fact, DriveWorks as a company runs their business on DriveWorks. And they use it as the central cog to connect their accounting system, their licensing package, et cetera, but everything else that they do, their day-to-day functions, is all channeled through DriveWorks and the interface that they've created to do that. Some companies just, they have a bottleneck in the design department. They just want to do some design automation. They don't care to have something in the cloud, a website where you can go to design product. They just want to automate some certain SOLIDWORKS tasks. In fact, we were working with a company not too long ago who it takes them a week to develop a manufacturing drawing package for production purposes, and DriveWorks is going to distill that down into minutes. Okay, maybe nowhere else in the company will they use DriveWorks, but they're going to take full advantage of it in that department. Others, yet again, use it just for the online configurator aspect. They don't use SOLIDWORKS. They might not use CAD at all elsewhere in their business, but they do want to have that option to project their product out into the public like that. Speaking of which, for the CAD automation, DriveWorks does work exclusively with SOLIDWORKS, but on the configurator front, it is open to other CAD formats like Inventor, Pro-E, Creo, Solid Edge, and SolidWorks, of course. So there are some options on that front. Okay, well, I hope that was helpful for all to understand better what DriveWorks is all about. I think with that, this is a good opportunity to kick off some Q&A. We've got about 20 minutes left. So Andrew and Matt, what do we have in store for questions?
All right, Joel, thank you. That was awesome. We do have a few questions that came through, so I'll just I'll read them off as they were submitted. So we've got about got a few of these. So just wanted to kick it off. So the first question for you, Joel, is can the out-of-the-box template be modified if you want it to include more data?
Out-of-the-box template. I don't know if that's referring to the CPQ, that configurator template, or just DriveWorks as a whole. But I'm kind of guessing on what that question is getting at, but I'll speak to a few things that come to mind. You can expose DriveWorks to all sorts of data in all sorts of formats. For example, some folks for their design automation don't actually create a form environment within DriveWorks, because let's say they're able to enter an order sufficiently in their ERP system, or maybe they do have an Excel spreadsheet set up well already that just, they already use it, it works, they can enter their order in there, capture everything that's needed. Okay, great. Well, we can have DriveWorks go to Excel or go to that ERP and automatically detect, hey, there's a new order or a new product or new thing, and then fire off the automation from there, bypassing that form step altogether. So just a number of ways that DriveWorks can pull in data and act on it in an automatic fashion would be an Excel file, a text file, a CSV file, XML, SQL database, any number of databases. I'll go back to the integration slide. Any number of databases, any number of actual files. We can start to use web services, APIs, and then there are some packages that DriveWorks has already developed a plugin for an even more direct integration. But we do have use cases of integrating DriveWorks with all manner of ERP out there. So I'm not sure if that was, if the question was referring to the CPQ template. I'm not sure. What was the question again, Andrew? Can it use other data?
The question was, can the out-of-the-box template be modified if you want to include more data?
Well, so the CPQ template, if that's what the question is directed at, can in fact be modified. In fact, it's intended to be downloaded and used, and then you customize it from there. And to what, again, to what direction you point it to go get data, from what system, from what document, that's, you know, in the eye of the beholder, really. So hopefully that answers that question.
Okay. So question 2 is the process building done with nodes as shown on the slide?
Correct. So let's see here. This is an example of setting up a very specific and granular process. So I don't know, let's say you want to establish a process for, well, just first let's distinguish between a workflow and a process. A workflow might be, you know, think of it as like a recipe for cooking something, cooking a dish. Okay, turn on the oven, then you cut your vegetables, then you know, pour all your ingredients in your measuring cups, and then this and that. So that's kind of your higher level stuff, but a process is more like, okay, well, the tomatoes need to be cut just like this. And then you add it to the dish at this exact time. And then, but the garlic, that has to go into the oil, which has to be at a very certain temperature, et cetera. So it's when you get really down to that granular level of control, where you need literally something to happen for something else in just a certain fashion, that's what a process is in DriveWorks. And yes, these are all, we call them tasks, and the tasks have nodes. That's what each of these little orbs represents. And there's a number of ways that you can link tasks together and certain ways of communicating data between and instilling basically any kind of logic that you could think of that you want to control at that minute level of detail. That's all there in a process. And yeah, these are all controlled in a WYSIWYG drag and drop nature. In fact, we still have this. Let's make something up here. And we're going to export 3D to STL. After we do this process here, and only if it's successful, but if this process is a failure, then we're going to have it delete a row of data over here. And then after that, we need to, I don't know, I'm just picking stuff, update a control value over here. Okay, I just might not make any sense, but that's how complicated it is to design your very own granular process. And then you have nearly anything in DriveWorks can be statically driven, like you can just pick something from a list, or you expose it in a dynamic nature, you open up the rule building environment, and then you have total and complete control at every level for setting up that process. Any more questions?
All right, perfect. Joel, I appreciate it. So we've got, it looks like about 7 or 8 more questions, so I want to be respectful of our time. We've got about 14 more minutes left. So the next question is, will this work with my existing SolidWorks models?
The shorter answer, yes. There are interesting things that can be done with when you start to automate rather than when you manipulate models manually. You can introduce a whole new range of how you control assemblies, how you introduce efficiency into the automation process, etc. But yes, in principle, you can take your existing models and files and drawings and use those as a master template and just simply go in and capture to create the linkage between SolidWorks and DriveWorks. So for example, this is the master assembly set for the chart. Okay, it's got everything that you could possibly want out of this product kind of installed and configured and ready. And so what DriveWorks is going to do is come in and just modify dimensions and probably delete whatever's not needed. So this is sort of a top-heavy example. We're stuffing everything that you could possibly want into this master file and then removing from there. Alternatively, we could start with a blank assembly and add in a generative format. So you're going to start with nothing and then add as needed. So literally insert components, create mates, drive them in a very specific way. And that enables a whole nother world of opportunity for very particular automation. But anyways, just a single example of how you might link any given part file to to DriveWorks. We can capture this file here. I just named it tube. We might have some dimensions. Okay, we want to capture this and call it tube diameter, etc. Okay, save it, go into DriveWorks. I'm not sure what I just opened there. Rinse P1. There we go. There it is. There's the tube diameter. I can create a rule as complicated as I want, or I can just stick a static value in there, really whatever your design calls for. Furthermore, that tube feature, I can suppress it, I can delete it, I can drive configurations, I can drive colors, all sorts of things can happen throughout the model. But to answer the question, yes, if you have an existing SolidWorks assembly and model set, that's an excellent starting point.
Excellent. Thank you. Next question. How much front-end work is typically needed to get started automating products?
So the nice thing, and frankly the key thing about DriveWorks, is it's very modular in nature, and a typical implementation starts small and then grows from there. And so you can take, let's say, just pick one product or product family or product type, go full cycle with introducing it to DriveWorks, controlling it, automating it, fine-tuning it, and getting just the exact output that you would want. You're going to learn a ton through that first experience, and then be well armed to go and attack the rest of your product range. Okay, and that's just design automation. Then the equivalent steps can happen for configuration, automation, integration, and other aspects of using DriveWorks as a whole. So using DriveWorks is really a journey. It's not it can be a sort of defined project for very simple use cases, but typically once a company starts using it, they start to see all the potential to leverage it, and it just becomes a new way of approaching your business. So, but in any case, just to get started and just have your basic design automation functionality in place for, let's say, this shower example. For a total beginner, it's after taking there is training that's offered that is highly recommended, and probably some like other consultative activities from someone like TPM. But once you're off and running, that could be a month-long project to have it be completely automated and fulfilled and ready for production. Those are very rough numbers, and I think we'll get more into how we can address those specific questions for your company and your products in a few minutes.
Gotcha. Cool. So it looks like we've got about 6 or 7 more questions, Joel, just to give you a heads up. Okay. Next question. Can DriveWorks be integrated with Microsoft Dynamics AX?
The short answer is yes. I've not personally been involved with an integration with AX. I mean, that Tier 1 ERP system is a sophisticated piece, but in principle, DriveWorks can, through the means that we went over an integration slide, can communicate in any number of ways. Okay, so to the extent that AX has open APIs, we can go through there, or web services, or through a neutral or middle database. The answer to that question for any kind of ERP is really more a function of the ERP itself, not so much DriveWorks. Okay, so SysPro, for example, there's a direct plugin that gives direct institutionalized access to their business object architecture, so that we can access those directly through DriveWorks without any sort of additional development. Okay. So making that kind of a deep and direct connection into AX that'll require a bit more discovery, and probably working, if you have a consulting firm that you use for your ERP development, there'll probably be some conversations you had there. But generally speaking, there is no ERP that I'm aware of that we cannot integrate.
Perfect. Thanks, Joel. Next question. Can you populate the slider bar data with the data from the text file or Excel?
Yes. So any type of form control. A slider is just, let's see if we had an example of that here. I don't think we did. But we can pull it in. All right, so we've got a new slider. If that's the type of form control that you want, great. Yes, the value that would otherwise be put by hand can be forced in automatically through an external data source. But you could say the same about any, like a label or a text box control or a numeric text box or a combo box. Any type of control that you can imagine can also be driven all the same through an external data source. So if it's Excel, a text file, whatever, we can pull that in and force the value either into the form environment that you want, may or may not have in DriveWorks, or directly, let's say, into your model rules that gets fed directly into SOLIDWORKS.
Awesome. Next question, can DriveWorks work with SolidWorks PDM?
Yes, there's a very deep integration with PDM Pro. There are a number of ready-made tasks. Let's see if I have that plug-in on this machine. Number of just inbuilt native functionality for PDM Pro ready to go. So that's a pretty seamless aspect to work with in DriveWorks.
Okay. How does the system handle modifications that come up during the design/production process?
Sorry, can you read that one more time, Andrew?
Sure. How does the system handle modifications that come up during the design or production process?
So if the question is getting at revisions, you can set up a revisioning process, okay? And that gets back to the workflow topic. Okay, do you want to leave yourself an out or an in to re-engage with that design step? Okay, if you do, you would build your workflow a little differently. And of course, you can do things like create revision numbers on your files. You can have your drawings have a rev number. You can have a PDM know revision, etc. So if that's the nature of the question, then yes, that's just a matter of taking advantage of the standard customization of a process and workflow within DriveWorks. Now, if the question is directed more towards having how you manage the DriveWorks project and initiative as a whole, it is typical for companies to set up a development environment and a production environment. Okay, so you get your project to a certain state, you release it out into the public, whether that's to your factory or design department or to the internet, and that's deemed your production version, right? And then you have your development version that you continue to work on to make enhancements, improvements, add more products, etc. And then you have a process to push from development to production. So that is an implicit capability within DriveWorks to manage that kind of a development scheme.
Perfect. Next question is probably one that I could probably answer. Can you provide a copy of this presentation? The answer is yes. This is recorded, so everyone will get a copy of this recording to listen at your leisure and share with colleagues and what have you. Beyond that, Joel, I'm not sure beyond the recording if anything else is offered.
I suppose the deck can be made available. I'm not sure how we want to handle that, but
okay.
We do have contact information for folks. If you do want to learn more or get more, I'll leave this slide up here so we can circle back with you later.
Okay, perfect. And then the final question, does DriveWorks integrate with Siemens Teamcenter PLM?
We can we can get more examples of use cases with DriveWorks. So I think that's a great follow-up question. If we can get the contact info, or someone can reach out to Andrew or Matt to pose that question, we can go direct to DriveWorks, who of course has visibility across globally for all manner of implementation and integration. So personally, I'm not aware of that, but again, back to the integration slide, really the capability to integrate is less about DriveWorks and more about the other end of the integration. So for Siemens PLM, I don't have firsthand knowledge of that, so I can't really say anymore.
Gotcha, and we'll follow up with that one for sure. So that's it for questions. Really appreciate it, Joel. If anyone has any additional questions that we weren't able to address, or if you have any other questions coming out of this presentation, please let us know. I do want to really quickly mention a tech summit, our tech summit for SolidWorks. It's coming up for 2021 on October 5th and 6th. We'll be going over not only what's coming up in the latest version of SolidWorks 2021, but we're going to have additional sessions on the top 10 updates for the past 3 years of SolidWorks. We're going to continue a focus on CPQ and design automation through DriveWorks. We're going to talk a little bit more about Dassault and their new cloud-based platform 3D Experience, industry best practices in technology and additive manufacturing as well. So we're going to have a few sessions on digital transformation and leveraging your data as well. So I want to invite everybody to check out our Tech Summit coming up on the 5th and the 6th. We're going to send out some more information on that. Like we mentioned before, this presentation is being recorded and will be available for use later on. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Matthew. Our contact information is on the screen. Once again, Joel, thank you so much for this presentation. It was awesome. I hope everybody has a great weekend, and I hope everybody was able to get good value out of this presentation. We'd love to get your feedback. Thanks very much, everyone.